Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Monday morning. Lovely to see you. And as always, thank you so much for joining us as we continue our adventure through the Psalms. Now, some sharp-minded person on Friday said to me, Ben, why did you go straight from Psalm 74 to 76? The answer was, no reason at all. I just, for some reason, missed it out by mistake. So, without further ado, this morning, sorry for the omission, Psalm 75 it is. Here goes, Psalm 75. We give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks, your name is near. People tell of your wondrous deeds. At the set time that I will appoint, I will judge with equity. When the earth totters with all its inhabitants, it's I who keep the pillars steady. I say to the boastful, do not boast, and to the wicked, do not lift up your horn. Do not lift up your horn on high, or speak with insolent neck. For not from the east or from the west, and not from the wilderness comes up lifting up, but it is God who executes judgment, putting down one, lifting up another. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup with foaming wine well mixed. He will pour a draught from it, and all the wicked of the earth shall drain it down to the dregs. But I will rejoice forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. All the horns of the wicked I will cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be exalted. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay. Interesting psalm, this one. It's a short little psalm. We'll start with the title. Interesting. It's called. It calls itself a psalm of Asaph and a song, but the title is called "Do Not Destroy," which is an interesting title, really. No one knows quite where that could have come from. Because it could be the name of the tune. I've heard some interesting names of tunes, but "Do Not Destroy" is a strange one. It could just be something to do with the particular tune, because psalms were written to be accompanied by musical instruments. It could be the tune. But it could be a sort of reminder from God of times in the past where God has said with Moses, he would not destroy the people. Or with King David, there was one occasion when David was up against his enemies, and David said, do not destroy them. So it could be something to do with that, but it could just be the name of the tune. I've heard some interesting names of tunes, but "Do Not Destroy" is a strange one, isn't it? But there we go. That's what it could be. So that's the title. So it's a psalm of Asaph, not David. It's Asaph again, and the song is called "Do Not Destroy." Okay, the context, we don't know. We do know that the people are come up against some arrogant and wicked people. We don't know exactly when. It could be that after they were taken into exile, the Babylonians were described as being arrogant. It could be they were gloating over them. More of that in, say, later Psalms like 137. So it could be that they were being gloated over in exile. It could just be there were some wicked people who thought, I'll do it my way rather than God's way within the people of God. We don't know. But we do know that, as I say, Asaph and people they're coming up against some arrogant and wicked people who obviously think that they are God's gift, so to speak. And it's the arrogance and the wickedness that Asaph comes up against in this psalm. And so that's the context. We're not entirely sure, but we do know the kind of what he's up against there. And the structure is, it starts off with verse 1, which is basically has come together and thank God. That's verse 1. Then in verses 2 to 5, we have God speaking, and therefore God saying that I will judge, I will sort it all out, and so on. Then verses 6 to 9, you've got someone responding, God will judge, and then the last verse, a little bit by God at the end saying, I'll sort it all out, don't worry. So you've got verse 1, which is a kind of come before God, let's thank God. You've got God speaking in verses 2 to 5, saying what he's going to do. Then you've got verses 6 to 9, is that the people saying God is going to sort this out, so repeating what God said he's going to do. But at the end, you've got God reassuring, last verse, all the horns of the wicked I will cut off, and the horns of the righteous shall be exalted. So that's the structure of the psalm. That's what Psalm 75 is in short. Now, as I say, I think there's just, the easiest thing with this psalm is just to bring out four terms in particular, terms that are used here, that help us understand a bit about this psalm. Firstly, he talks a bit about somebody obviously needs rescuing, and this person needs some judgment because these wicked, arrogant people are obviously getting them down and so on. And he says here, give thanks for your name is near. That's in verse 1. So notice that the Asaph is absolutely confident that however difficult things may be, God is near, that God is close, that God is, God's judgment, God's sorting out of the right and the wrong is close at hand. Reminds me a bit of when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And here and Asaph is absolutely confident here that he can thank God because God's name and God's judgments and God is close at hand. So he's saying, don't worry, folks, whatever may be happening, God is close at hand. Okay, so God is near. So now's the time, so to speak. So that's the first thing to say in verse 1. You've got, give thanks for your name is near. So he's absolutely confident that God is close. That's the first thing. Then you've got a thing which I always have, this you get this elsewhere, when he talks a bit about your pillars. Verse 3, this is God talking. When the earth totters with all its inhabitants, it's I who keep the pillars steady. And again, I think this is really, really important. We like to think that we are terribly clever and everything else, but this reminds us that, if you like, the pillars of the earth are what are God holding everything up. I think we often think that God made the world and then left it, but actually God did not just make the world. God sustains the world as well. God didn't just make the world, but God holds the world in His hands. And if I take this book and if I hold it, if I take my hands off it, it drops. Then actually, in a sense, a bit like on pillars, something on pillars is being held up, actively held up by the pillars. And what God is saying here is, I hold the pillars of the earth. It's me that holds it all together. Everything feels so fine, actually, but it's fine because I hold it up. And it says elsewhere, I forget where it says, the pillars of the earth belong to God. That it is God who holds us up. That we like to think that we're, as I say, we're very clever, and so on and so on and so on. But we can take confidence, actually, that right will prevail because it is God who holds everything up. And we might think, as I say, we're terribly clever, but actually it's God who holds it up. So don't worry, folks. God holds the world in His hand. It's God who holds it. It's God who keeps it there. So we can take confidence in God from that. So we've got the fact that God is near. We've got the fact that God is the one who holds the pillars of the earth in His hands. Okay, it's I who keep the pillars steady. So it's all depending on God. Whatever it may seem like, it's all the whole earth depending on God. The third phrase, which comes out 2 or 3 times, is the word horn. He says, "Do not lift up your horn on high, or speak with insolent neck." Now, horn in the Psalms and the Old Testament song is symbol for power. It's a symbol for great power. So when it says, "Do not lift up your horn on high," basically means do not boast, do not be in your arrogance. He's saying to the wicked people, you think that you're terribly powerful and you strut it around. It's a symbol of power. You like display your symbol of power, and you may think that you are terribly, terribly powerful, but actually God is the one with the real power. And I think actually, people can think today that they are tremendously clever and, we don't need God anymore, and the incredible arrogance of the whole thing, that we may think, as I say, that we're terribly clever and so on and so on and so on. And people think they're very powerful. But actually, it's God who holds the real power. Because He says, all the horns of the wicked I will cut off, that's verse 10, and the horns of the righteous shall be exalted. So, but other things are code for things. Horn is code for a symbol of power. So what he's saying is, however powerful these people may think they are, God is so much more powerful than they are. And finally, when we talks about the cup, for in the hand of the Lord there is a cup with foaming wine well mixed. It's like the cup of wrath here, and he's saying that God will sort, and justice will be given out. As the old prayer book used to put, for the punishment of wickedness and vice, and to the maintenance of true religion and virtue. That judgment is coming. That these people who are having a hard time, they needn't worry because God is going to come with judgment. But it's interesting here. He talks about the cup of wrath, if you like, and in a sense you see something similar in the book of Revelation, of course, when there are 7 bowls of wrath. I forget which chapter it is. It's somewhere about 12 or something. He talks about the 7 bowls of wrath. That God's come to judge, to sort out what's right from what is wrong. But I think it's also interesting that, of course, Jesus said to His disciples, Peter, James and John, can you drink the cup that I will drink? That actually Jesus on the cross took on Himself that cup, the badness, the punishment that we should have had. He drank it Himself, that cup of wrath, that punishment or whatever, that the troubles that might have come to us because of our sin. Jesus drank that on the cross. That in his crucifixion and in His death, He took on Himself, if you like, the wrath, any trouble that we would have had coming to us, because ultimately the wages of sin are death, and he took that for us. So he talks here about the cup, which will form a draught to drink for the wicked of the earth. And Jesus, of course, wasn't wicked. He was righteous, but nonetheless he drank that cup for us. He drank the punishment, if you like, that we should have had. Took it on himself on the cross, so that in a sense, so that we can be set free, and we can live free lives, free of worry about punishment. So 4 terms from this psalm. Firstly, he says to the people, do not worry, because God is near. God is close. There's a real confidence that God is close. Secondly, like the pillars, it's God who holds everything up. We need to remember that we're only here because God holds us. He talks about a horn being a sign of power. These people shouldn't strut their power about, because actually God is the one with the real power, and justice will be done soon. And fourthly, that cup, which actually in a sense, he talks about God's cup here, but actually in a sense, Jesus took that for us on the cross. He took that death for us so that we can have life, and we can live life free to talk with God and be with God, and that he took it for us. The Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. God bless you, my friends. Have a lovely day.